Hi folks, welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand. With me on the show today I have Stan Deyo. Now Stan's been a guest on the A Minute to Midnight Show quite a few times over the years, and I have to say I've always learned a lot and really enjoyed our conversations on all sorts of different topics. So Stan, welcome back to the A Minute to Midnight Show, and hopefully this will be a good one too.
Well, let's hope so. We've got a lot of news items to address on the show images page that I put up. For your listeners, that's standeyo.com. And under the microphone, there's a little thing that says show images. It's a blue text, and you click on that and get to the page we're going to talk about this week. Anyway, it'll change toward next week. But yeah, there's about 63 or 64 slides on there with stories, and that'll help your listeners to follow us.
Yeah, so, well, I was looking through them and I looked at slide number 59, caught my interest to start with, and it's about the world's ocean temperatures. So I was thinking I'd ask your opinion. First you can explain it, but then I was going to say, they're saying that the ocean temperatures are the highest they've ever been, and I know the official narrative is it's all to do with CO2 and global warming and all of that, and I think, well, then other people say it's to do with geoengineering and HAARP and the ionosphere heaters doing it. And then some other people will say it's undersea volcanoes, or that it's the way they changed actually reading the temperatures and all that. And so maybe you can explain what's going on and tell me what you think is why the global temperatures for the water are high.
All right. Well, the information in this article is from the University of New South Wales, from Matthew England. So it's just across the pond from you there.
Yeah.
And what he was saying, it shows that the ocean temperatures are 21.1 centigrade, but that's only 0.1 centigrade up. But what people don't realize is on a planetary basis, 2 degrees centigrade plus or minus can either create an ice age or droughts and really extreme weather. Now, I do not think that the CO2, the cow gas, and all that kind of stuff is the cause of the change in our climate. The change, much like 95% of it, comes from the sun. That's where our major heat source is. And this solar cycle, it is crazy. I mean, the sun's surface is thin and throwing off loops and filaments. Even some of them been dark matter filaments. And I've been expecting this for some time. We can talk about that a bit later, but that's the cause, in my opinion, of the planetary heating. Now, I'm sure you've probably noticed that there are thunderstorms, droughts, things in different places now then, all over the planet. Yeah. And we've got increased volcanic activity, and earthquakes are starting to increase. I think all of these are tied to two things, for the sun, but also for the positions of Earth versus the sun, and versus the 3 or 4 major gas planets on the other side of the sun, and on our side. I mean, they're moving, but there's something there that's. In fact, I think I have a link here. Let me just see if we can push to that link here. Slide 45. I'm going to push the link, and then I'm going to share that with you. At here. You got it now? The planets today.
Yep, here it is. Yep.
Okay. Well, the Earth is that little blue thing on the left where my cursor is, and the sun there. Now, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn are all big planets, and their gravity, it's like a kid swinging a rope around, with a rock on it. As the heavy rock goes on this side, the kid leans toward the rock because of the inertia, and this is what's happening here. It's affecting the surface of the sun, in fact, the whole sun, as these gas giants line up over here, fairly close together. Now, what I'm going to do is go back and show in September the 24th this year, the Earth is going to be in the middle of all that cluster on that side of the sun. So between where it was over here to where it is now, I expect to see a lot of juggling, coming on the sun's surface from this gravitational stress. And that is, of course, adding to what we were talking about there, the heating of the oceans there. Now, let's see. Dr. England was also quoting a U.S. government data source. And let's see here. the current trajectory of the weather looks like it's headed off the charts, that the sea temperatures are going to get very hot. Now, I don't think it's going to get hotter than, that 2 degree centigrade shift. We're already at 1.7 C for the whole planet, not just the ocean temperature. But this is something that is causing sporadic, catastrophes, flooding. I mean, look at Florida. I mean, it's been having rain. It's been just sinking neighborhoods and stuff.
Well, we had a similar event here a few months ago, a cyclone which devastated parts of this region not far from me and quite widespread, the worst they'd had in many years. But I've noticed there's also tornadoes happening in New Zealand quite regularly, and they used to be very rare. So,
well, yeah, there it is again. Okay, now am I back to your screen there? Yep. Okay. This is just one of the things that we have to be concerned about. But looking at my show images page, there's let's see. Yeah, in fact, I'll share the screen and get in there and point to it for you. Okay, that should do it. Okay, now this is a section on my show images page that has most of the stuff on solar. It's right here. Now, I every couple of days I go and check at this place here, where let me just pull that up here at the heliographic chart here, showing the active regions on the sun in bright white versus the calm regions in green. And the left and right sides of that graph there are black, because that satellite that we used to be able to get that data from around the backside of the sun has not been working for about 10 years. It's too expensive to fix it. But what this is telling us, right in the middle of the graph here, where it says 0 longitude, that's facing Earth right now. And this on this side is what's moving toward us, and then it moves off the graph like that. So there's something big coming up here in the northern part of this graph, which is, the north of the sun. So I look to here to see what's coming in the next 5 to 8 days. Right in here, it's moving toward us. So that'll be Earth directed totally in about 8.5, 9 days. If it shoots off a coronal mass ejection, or has a coronal hole or whatever, it will be pointed at us straight enough that we'll get the effect of it. It might even make what's called a halo coronal mass ejection, which is a circular smoke ring looking plasma burst. And if you get it aimed right at you and it's strong enough, it can wipe out all the electric power on the side of the Earth that's facing it, which happened in 1859, I think, with the Carrington event.
Yeah.
So this is what I use, several times a week to see what's happening. Now, on the 17th, which was a couple of days ago, at slide 49, we had a number of things already facing us. These aren't bad yet. And what we saw on that green one was showing us that over here on the top left part of the graph here, or the photo, it's going to be moving around and down toward us right here when it gets to where my cursor is. Again, in this area, in fact, all through this area right here, if you've got heavy activity worse than this, it's a danger time for us for getting hit. And if slide 46, if I click on it, you can see how it's throwing off filaments. Can you see that?
Yes. Yeah.
Those are big things, mighty things. Now, our solar cycle, sunspot cycle, is where they count the number of sunspots, the surface area of the sun that has sunspots in it. And that's how they determine a start and end to the solar cycle, where the north and south magnetic poles flip-flop. What we see here in this graph at 2025, a couple of years from now, is where originally they were thinking that the solar maximum would occur in here, that the maximum number of sunspots would be there, and then it'd start to fall off. And here you can see last cycle and the cycle before, what we're now seeing adjusted is the sun is over double what it should have been, what they're forecasting, and they don't know why. And again, this is affecting our weather. And let me just pull that up there a little bit closer. You can see where the green is. That's where the sunspot activity is today. And then, of course, this is the forecast and then the median line for that. Again, this is what's causing, in my opinion, some of these massive changes in weather. And they've been doing some other work here on imaging these magnetic filaments that form long canyons of magnetic fire, if you want, there on the surface of the sun. These black things are really quite hot. And it's a new service they're offering so that you can get a close look at these canyons. And see here, in this one here, it's like it's a tear in the surface of the sun, and you can see it's linked to this activity that's happening right now, which is normal coronal mass ejection type weather on the sun. And again, as I say, this side here moves around this way to the right, facing us. That's the direction of motion of it. And these things here, what slide am I on? That's slide 55. This is a snapshot showing in the yellow here, down the lower left here, the emissions, solar wind and flares and potential flares coming toward the Earth, which is this little green dot right here, and there. Now, this is measuring the speed of the solar wind and emissions from the sun. So in about 8 days or so, it's going to start moving into an Earth effective direction. This Catherine wheel spins around like that. So in the next 8 to say 17 days, we're going to get hit with a lot of interesting stuff from the sun. And the thickness of the density of the sun ejections is shown by this map here. And this is, let me see, are we showing? Yeah, this I made from the 15th through the 21st, predicting it, forecasting it. And this is how thick or how dense the throw-off is. Now, believe it or not, the worst density has already passed us here for this rotation. And looking down here, you see this is the speed of the stuff, and this is the density of it, which it doesn't show it's going to be very dense. So we may opt out with just a few radio communications blackouts from it. All good stuff to study. All right.
Is this a general trend, though, that things are increasing or, since you've been doing this?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's like Art Bell used to say in his nighttime program years ago. He says, it's the quickening as we approach the great time of change, and the tribulation period in the Bible, I think, is that. And we are seeing, an increase in earthquakes of significance in, remote areas, which is, biblically, what we've been told would happen. With the activity in the Middle East, between Saudi Arabia and Russia and China and Iran, China, Russia, yeah, and with Israel, the things are heating up politically as well as the changes in the weather. We've been so dry here in Colorado; it's unreal. I mean, it's just we look forward to a drop of rain at this point. It's been several years of extreme drought, and the rain is moving elsewhere. So there are climatic changes occurring, which are not, due to just subtle, earth changes from gas and that kind of stuff. Those things do contribute, but I think less than 5% of our worries are coming from these man-made, or industry-made changes in our atmosphere. We can't stop this. Now, if you were the government of this country or any country that's faced with this kind of change, Tony, you wouldn't sit there and say officially, look, we've got something coming from the sun that is just really cooking our goose here, and well, there's nothing we can do about it. Just bend over and kiss it goodbye. You wouldn't say that because you'd create anarchy. So what you do is, like with you and I and others that are unofficial sources, you make the information available to them, and point them to it and let them analyze it and say, from an unofficial point, this is what I see happening. And those people who are listening to you and saying, yeah, maybe I'll look into that. That will be a very subtle reaction where those people will prepare for what is coming potentially and take action, and without anarchy. And so that's what we're seeing here. And people say, the government's not telling us everything. Well, yeah, that's true. Not all at once. Anyway, it's leaking out, if you get my drift there. So
yeah, well, we've had the opposite of you. We've had just like wet rain, and it was certainly not hotter than normal. It's been cooler than normal and wetter than normal for months, really, apart from a few bits here and there. But we can hardly string a week together without getting rain at some point. And the ground never really dried out like it normally does in the summer. And so now, of course, we're in autumn.
How long has it been since you were just normal there? How many years or months?
Oh, I would say a year at least, I would think. That's my opinion. Whether they'd officially say that, I don't know. But from what I've observed, it's certainly been, I think, a year, probably.
Well, then going back in time for yourself, uh, in that location in New Zealand, there is it uh, a typical? It's typically, is it that wet or not?
No.
Year to
I
year,
mean,
year to
I've
year.
moved location a few months ago, but as far as I'm aware, it's the same pretty much everywhere, that so much of the country has had, not just where I am, wet, much wetter than normal. And yeah, like Auckland, for example, had a couple of major weather events where there was a cyclone, and but before that, they had a rain, like the heaviest rainfall in 24 hours ever measured in Auckland, I believe.
Wow.
So
Well, so you're getting what the opposite of what we're getting with the
yes,
drought. So it
yeah,
it shows you climate is changing. Not for the better for a lot of us, but if it moves away from encouraging, food growth, plant growth, and that kind of stuff, that's not good for a lot of us. Even if we're not in that area, we still buy, cattle and corn and wheat and various things from these areas.
hmm.
If it's not producing, if it's flooded out, or if it's droughted out, it's affecting the whole planet, not just those areas.
Oh yeah. I mean, the crops here were terrible in many cases, just because of the
Really?
wet.
Yeah.
Some stuff just didn't want to grow. It was just not doing any good at all. In fact, whole areas in the Hawke's Bay got wiped out, like vineyards and things, masses.
Mm.
And that's kind of the breadbasket in New Zealand, and they got hit the worst by probably the cyclone. A lot of that area, which is not that far from where I am. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. Mm.
Well, looking at the archaeological evidence in, say, South America of the Inca, the Olmecs, and the various uh, civilizations that have been there, we've seen where there were massive shifts of the population and changes in government style moving from place to place because of drought or rain, either
Mm.
way. And so we're probably going to see a lot of this across the planet where, you know, cities are going to close down. They can't support, in that area, or, countries. I mean, look at Africa. There have been a lot of the tribes there that bought rice from Ukraine,
Mm.
and not there are wheat and those kind of things, and that's not even their weather; it's Ukraine's situation with Russia. So all these things in an interconnected world like this can mean disaster for areas far away from where the weather changes. But I do think the weather is going to continue to be crazy, erratic, all over the
Well,
place.
are they making it worse with geoengineering as well? And I saw an article this morning about some expert in Africa and Nigeria saying it doesn't believe they should be using Africa as an experimental place for their geoengineering. And so, I'm no expert on it, but I do wonder how much impact what they're already doing is having. They're supposedly fighting global warming with it. But is that all just exasperating the whole problem rather than making any
Well,
improvements?
look at this. When you say they are geoengineering, are you talking about a country,
Oh, I mean
a group of
governments
countries?
in general around the world. Yeah.
If they're not in agreement about how to do it, then if one starts it and another one starts it a different way, it creates problems, doesn't it?
Hmm.
It's like in the 1970s, the United States and Russia signed treaties against weather warfare. But if you progress beyond that and say, well, let's make it rain more in Africa or in the Middle East, you have to have the agreement of the countries that are going to be involved in the changes. A simple way to geoengineer back in the 70s was in Siberia to take coal dust and spread it all over the snow to cause a change in the temperature over there, which then changed the weather in the Aleutians and in the Northwest and in Canada. So it needs a global organization with a single purpose, handling the attempts to alter the weather all over the planet. You can't have two or three groups each trying to do it their own way, using their own scientific evidence, whatever it is. This is why they're turning to artificial intelligence, to supercomputers, to feed these problems into and say, all right, here's the data. What do you think? What do we do? And then when it comes up with a solution, then to implement that, it says, what do we do? It says, well, get a global government. and you can see where it's heading.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And you could the global government and tie that in with central bank digital currencies and all that, which is moving rapidly ahead. And the whole AI thing. It's a pretty scary thing. One other thing at this point I really wanted to ask you about, and that was the fault, the big crack in the fault off the west coast of the US. What are your thoughts on with that?
Well, that fault over there is about a 600-mile long fault line. It's opened up in the Juan de Fuca plate in the northern part of it. Now, why it's of great interest is that we know that Juan de Fuca plate from the lower northwest of Canada down to northern California, that whole area is building up plate tectonic pressure. It's been doing it for over 60 years. It's overdue by 10 years for an average super or mega quake in that area. These fault lines, one from the Pacific moving under the U.S. plate here, is like two sheets of kind of semi-rubbery substance. And if they're properly lubricated, then they move, easily like this and slide down, just slowly like that. But if the lubricant, which is we found it's busting out of there in this 600-mile long fault, this lubricant water is being shot out instead of being contained within there to be, a lubricant. And that's meaning that the Pacific plate is doing this. It's kind of hanging and then jerking as it stretches, to relieve the pressure instead of smoothly. They're saying that they expect an over 9 Richter earthquake to hit the area, and probably very soon, mainly because the lubricant is escaping and not staying down there to make it a smooth transition, which is causing this jerky motion, which of course creates the huge earthquake and then the tsunami from there across the North Pacific. So this is of concern to a lot of people. If you click on the picture in our slide 63 on that.
Share the screen on that one.
Yeah, I'll do it. Just a second here. Gotta get here, share screen to that one there. And we'll look at the picture there. This little rectangle here in Newport, in Oregon coast there, that's showing where that leak is occurring. And the rest of these things, there's the 600-mile long blowout, which they're calling it. It just blows out the lubricant. All right. Now, the article says, scientists fear a hole in a 600-mile long fault line in the Pacific could trigger a catastrophic earthquake that would decimate cities all along the northwestern United States, of course, southwestern part of Canada. The geological feature is capable of unleashing a magnitude 9 earthquake in the northwest Pacific, and the hole could be the fuel it needs. The hole spewing hot liquid sits 50 miles off the shoreline of Oregon on the boundary of the dipping fault line known as the Cascadia subduction zone, which is where the Juan de Fuca plate stuff is. Let me see if we got a picture of that somewhere along here. No, I don't see one here. Well, we could probably do that map there. The Juan de Fuca plate is all along this where my cursor is, the northwest up to Canada there. That's the plate that we're talking about. And if it blows, it's going to throw water and quake all along this coastline, all the way down here to probably just south of Eureka in California. So yeah, it's imminent. I know that we're watching Lake Taupo over where you are. It's the White Island volcano is at a level 2 alert, and Taupo and I think it's Ropeo are at level 1. They've been that way for about a month. Last month, at the beginning, I think we had about 600 earthquakes in the northeast corner of the Lake Taupo, which is not where you want it.
No.
And well, when I was down there visiting with the IGNS or the GNS that you call them down there, they were concerned if it gets to be a drought there, which from what you're saying may not be the issue, but if the water level drops on Lake Taupo, it's a weight. It's holding a lid on the magma chamber. If something happens and it fractures, which they are testing for now, the fumaroles are like leaks of hot fluid in the bottom of Lake Taupo. If it happens that it fractures and the water starts to drain out of there into that hot magma pool underneath it, it will form a catastrophic steam explosion volcano, which could take out half of the North Island.
Yeah, well, hopefully that doesn't happen. I mean, they certainly don't have the drought, but yes, that Lac Taupo is always, a potential disaster. But I just want to go back to a thought I've been having. You were talking about with the US, that fault line and the potential for an earthquake and tsunami. And I was wondering, well, we've got this World War III type scenario developing seemingly more and more with the Ukraine and Russia situation in the US, and then you got China involved and all that. I was thinking, what a big fault like that with a crack in it, would that not be a perfect place to detonate nuclear weapons if you wanted to cause a catastrophe, deliberately trigger it?
Well, not only is it a potential place or a good place, the Russians are already looking at it. They have a tsunami bomb,
Yeah.
they call it, and it's a nuke that's in like a torpedo, and they can go into international waters and shoot that toward our shoreline over on the northeast coast and over on the northwest coast, where we're talking about, and create not only tsunamis or from the explosion, but radioactive tsunamis. It's radioactive stuff all over where it comes, and it just kills you. So yes, they have been looking at it, and it's very hard to defend against that.
Yeah, well, that would
Once it's
seem like a terrible way, but it could be potentially, in a war, which it does look increasingly that it's hard to see a resolution the way it's going. That it could go in that sort of direction, and then so yeah,
well, the U.S. depends on a lot of its electronic stuff from chips and things in Taiwan, which China is trying to take back into mainland China.
yeah,
Now, this is creating, of course, tensions with us. It should be even more tensions if we had Trump in the White House instead of this turkey they got through now. He would stop this and say that's far enough. Get out of there. You're not taking Taiwan, and we'll blast your ships out of the water and that kind of stuff. But Biden is the people behind him, his controllers, are letting it happen, and we're going to be weakened here, I think, by a civil war over the people that want the government out and a new government back in, like the conservative government to defend the United States in the money markets and in the military markets. This civil war is going to put chaos amongst us here, on the country here, and China and Russia and then Iran has already agreed with them. They can come in and nuke our major cities, get past all of our defenses because this government has let them atrophy, cut money budgets to military and that kind of stuff. So all this could happen just in the blink of an eye. Even the native people here, the Hopi who talked to Holly and I, they brought us down there to their reservation there, and they said that there's going to be a massive civil war that's not going to be just north or south or anything like that. It's going to be rich against poor. It's going to be conservative against liberal. It's going to be religious, boundaries. All of these things happening at once. It's going to destroy us as a cohesive country and allow China and Russia and a Middle Eastern nation. They didn't say Iran, but that's probably who they meant, to move in and occupy the United States for a short period of time and then leave. I didn't say why they would leave, but probably because everything is so messed up that they don't want to be here. But yeah, that's. I mean, like my company over in Kansas, next state over from us here, we have a company that we started 5 years ago with the EMP shield business that we invented, and then the government, the Democratic government, believe it or not, liberal government, passed the CHIPS Act. And the CHIPS Act was to put a couple $1 billion into Kansas, where our factories are, to make chips locally instead of in China, which makes sense, right? So we're doing that, and that's probably that area there is intensely being funded by various parts of the government and defense and industry because it's inland and well protected. We've got a lot of missile silos around there, that kind of stuff. So we're doing our part, to try to stave off, EMP attacks on the country, which disables everything. I think the best thing we could do really is get rid of the people in the White House and put some real people, thinking people in there instead of idiots. But I expect we're going to see American trouble soon. I hope your wife is able to come home before that.
Yes, same. Yep. Or I get over to America for a little while first, and we both are able to come back here. That would be good. if the
Yeah.
American government would let us unvaccinated people come in, which they still aren't. Maybe May they'll announce that they will. We'll see what happens. I've been waiting for that, but anyway, we'll see. Just one more thing when we're talking about all that. What about the east coast of the US? Is there any actual threats to the coastline on the east side, or is it just the west side?
Well, from fault lines, not so much. But inland from the east coast, you have the New Madrid fault line,
Yeah.
which Mississippi and that stuff. That could be a problem. With the action on the west coast, that could trigger what is building up in the New Madrid fault line. Offshore, well, that's not exactly right, but inland about maybe 30, 40 miles on the east coast, New England coast, there is another fault line they've been talking about, which is not widely known. If the Russians use their tsunami bomb there off of that coast, that could trigger that one as well. So, geophysical challenges are going to be problematic everywhere, and forecasting is even more problematic because we just don't have enough data sources, to do that with. With the changes going on, have you heard that trumpeting sound they were talking about over in?
No, I haven't heard it. No.
You know about it though?
Yeah.
Okay, that to me is caused by pressure in volcanoes in their cool magma tubes. The lava tubes that have cooled and hardened. They're like long trumpets, and pressure down below from it's the core of the Earth heating up or expanding. Something is pressing all over the planet on these things and pressing these vibrations and sound up these tubes, making what sounds like a trumpet.
Yeah.
And I've listened to it, and that's exactly what it sounds like. Even the Bible spoke about Mount Sinai, it was trumpeting. And that was probably when the heat was coming up through the cool lava tubes there at Mount Sinai in southern or southwestern Saudi Arabia, at Jabal el-Lawz. That's what it's called today. So that's another sign that the core of the planet is doing something. If it's not expanding, it's certainly heating up all over the planet. And we're seeing these volcanic activities, these strange sounds, which carry for hundreds of miles, reflecting off the atmosphere. And this has nothing to do with, UFOs or aliens. This is the normal progress of our planet. It's something that will cause the people of Earth to need someone in charge of the whole planet, to issue aid and food and that kind of stuff out to the affected areas. But I think with the dissatisfaction that most of the population of the planet, like over 60% of the nations, are having violent protests against their governments, that the world is going to ask for a clean slate world government that has no religious or political ties. And if it's an alien one with flying saucers and super technology, that's even better. And we're seeing, like even yesterday and today on Fox News, mainstream news, are aliens going to come, we're getting more reports. Are they going to help us? Are they going to be against us? You can see how all this fits in with biblical prophecy.
Yeah. So to end up, I guess, what we've been discussing, what do we do, like spiritually and preparedly? What are your thoughts on, going forward? Since we can't run away from this situation, we're facing it,
No, we can't. And it's you do need to prepare your house, with some emergency supplies and food, water, power, whatever you can do for as long as you can. Nobody's going to be able to prepare everything against every eventuality. So you do basic preparation. And Holly's book, Dare to Prepare, tells you how to do all that stuff, how to start small and work your way up. But you do that. And then you also pray daily to God that you are found worthy to be delivered from this time of tribulation, whether it be in the rapture or to a place of his choosing somewhere else, to be delivered. Because as you said, we cannot face this by ourselves. It's just, too powerful. That's Satan and his minions doing all this on the planet. And so we ask our side, our commander, Jesus, okay, look, save us. And tell us what to do, show us what to do. And people are having dream visions already in their local areas about what they need to do. And we're seeing a resurgence of Christian belief in one of the universities over east, just continuous releases of like the Holy Spirit in meetings. So these things, to me, indicate that we're at a time where we can call on the help of the Holy Spirit and of Jesus to endure these times the way he wants us to. Doesn't mean that everyone's going to survive and not die before the rapture or whatever. It just means that you will be directed where he wants you. And I'm pretty sure you can ask for a peaceful death if you've got to die before the rapture. But other than that, there's only so much you can do. I mean, if they take your money away and go digital like you're talking about, well, what are you going to do?
Yes, well, you're right. We can't prepare. We can prepare to an extent, but we can't really prepare for every eventuality. Anyway, I guess we'll leave it at that for this one, Stan. That was really good, and let's try and schedule another show to catch up on a little bit more of this before too long. So thank you once again.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And folks, don't forget a-minute-to-midnight.com. Make sure you subscribe to us there. And A Minute to Midnight is run 100% by donations, and if you're able to donate, it's always much appreciated. Thank you to the folks that do, and the music used I've written, played and recorded. So God bless, and hopefully we'll be back with another show in a few days' time.